So who's my guest this week? Marina Litvinenko. As Ukraine is scarred by war, my guest knows all about the brutality of Vladimir Putin and the Russian state. Her husband was Alexander Litvinenko, a former KGB agent and source of British intelligence. He sought asylum in the UK for him and his family after criticising Putin. In 2006, he was poisoned with polonium-210 in London and died as a result. Just last year, a European court found that it was Kremlin operatives who were responsible. Since his death, Marina has fought for justice, compensation from Russia, and campaigned to highlight the danger Putin poses to the West. As Russia faces isolation after its invasion of Ukraine, what can my guest tell us about how politics becomes personal? Here's a bit of what's coming up.
My husband, Alexander Litvinenko, worried people in 2006, saying, in a time when we all try to find virtual bin Laden, in the same time we have another man who's going to be as a Hitler, to put the blood all around. If you don't stop Putin, we will have a nuclear war. There's a million people will die.
Marina, thank you so much for joining us and talking to me today. I wanted to start by asking, when the Russian invasion of Ukraine began, where were you when you heard about it?
You will not believe, but I was in Ukraine. It happened exactly when I was staying in a very small city in the very west of Ukraine. And during the night, it started, and I received this news. I was really shocked.
And what did you do?
First of all, we tried to find all communication to people who were in Kiev, in Odessa, in Kharkov, because we know it was the heaviest bombing and attacking these places. My very good friend, she's a member of Ukrainian parliament, Rada. She called me and saying, we will fight to the end. And another thing, she said, I've never took any rifle or any weapon to my hands because I'm pacifist. But now she said, I'm going to do this.
Well, this is all of the members of parliament have been given guns. The men, yes, the women, and many civilians for the first time are going to be learning and have been learning how to use guns and rifles.
Absolutely. And I just asked her, please tell me what I have to do, how I can help. She said, talk to people, explain to anybody who can't understand what happened between Russia and Ukraine, and send this message, we will fight to the end, and we're going to die for our country.
The emotional feeling that you had, though, when you heard that this had happened, it was beginning, what was that like for you? Because you have such a connection to this story personally with trying to get the world to listen to you about Russia.
This was, again, sadness of being every time behind of something happened. When we did talk about sanctions against Russia during this moment when my husband was poisoned, this was all delayed or denied or just tried to comfort people and saying, oh, maybe we should not do this. We need to keep this relationship with Russia. Then this was another event in Georgia, but it was quite far away from UK. But then we have a Skripal. It was a Salisbury. This was attempted to poison using a chemical now.
You're talking about the poisonings in Salisbury in England as well?
As well. And I was really shocked. I tried to prevent this might happen again by doing all of this for justice for my husband, to make this obvious. Russia state is a quite dangerous state, and you need to understand it. And now we have this in Ukraine. And I know since 2014, it was asking for more attention, what is happening in Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia.
What do you think drives Putin?
You know, when we're talking about Putin, I would like to remind what was the greatest catastrophe of the century is the collapsing of Soviet Union. Was he alone? Not. He's approaching only his 70s. How many people as him, been educated in KGB school, being in the same age or maybe younger, did they accept this change in Russia? No. They hate all this private business. They hate oligarchs in the same way how like other Russian ordinary people hated them. Even they benefited from Putin's regime. And now is this revenge of these people from KGB who are still alive, still be very strong, and they want to get back Russia to this close position to be a Soviet Union. They don't care about private business. They don't care about people. They want to take total control. And only things when this Russia became completely isolated, it might be stopped.
Does that mean that if Putin is stopped because he is the leader, do you have faith that Russia could be different? Do you have faith that, or do you think there are too many people like him who are close to power and it would just be another Putin put in?
Of course, I do have it because I'm optimist and I always wanted to see Russia in a different way, and I'm still be proud to be Russian. And it's so many Russian people want to see Russia different. But I'm so afraid before Russia became better, it would be something worse. It might be all under control of military. Maybe they just decide to stop this war because they don't want to die. Putin being in a bunker or somewhere else, we don't know, but he believes everything what has happened during this war, it's not so bad. But military people, they're in real situation and they see they just lost a lot and people dying, and they might change some tactics and they might take over Putin, but they will take over in country as well.
Some people say Putin is mad. Some people describe him as evil. I recognise you want to talk more broadly, but what are your feelings? Because there's very few people in your position where they can say the Russian state killed my husband, which the European Court ruled on your case. There's even fewer that they can say it was probably Putin who was behind it, which the UK inquiry ruled. What do you think should happen to Putin, and how do you feel towards him?
Of course, I'm not a psychologist, but I think Putin never been a person prepared to be a leader of huge country as Russia. And if you look to his past, he never been ambitious. You know, any political leader have ambitions to be a leader or being in a party or became a businessman, a head of any business. Putin never. And I think it was real conversation when Boris Berezovsky was alive. It was back to Russia. And this was a challenge. Yeltsin is old, and it definitely need to be somebody after him. And Boris Berezovsky asked Vladimir Putin, would you like to be a president of Russia? Putin said, no. At least I want to be a head of Gazprom. And this was the biggest target he wanted to be. And it looked like he built all Russia as a big Gazprom to receive money from selling gas and oil. And of course, you became crazy when you should take some responsibility, when you need to answer for what happened in your own country. And we remember every time when it was some terrorist attack or what happened in Beslan, it took a time when Putin responded. Because I know he was just frightening to say anything. He was not a leader. And now when you have this so much pressure, of course you might become crazy. Who knows?
Would you support the calls for his assassination?
If you call him Bin Laden, like Bin Laden, if you don't have any other way to change situation, maybe. But I would like to say my husband, Alexander Litvinenko, worried people in 2006, saying, in a time when we all try to find virtual Bin Laden, in the same time we have another man who is going to be as a Hitler, to put the blood all around. If you don't stop Putin, we will have a nuclear war, with 1 million people will die.
This was the warning then?
Yes, in 2006.
What do you think he would make of what's happening today?
You know, it's so difficult every time to say just like that. But on the 6th, what I'm very glad I can say what Sasha tried to prevent, what he tried to say.
If I may, I just should say, you refer to him as Sasha, just so
Yes.
our viewers understand.
And every time what Sasha, my husband, Alexander Litvinenko, tried to prevent, tried to send message, unfortunately, he was not heard. But now, his words, his messages, they're still very much alive.
Do you see that as part of your work to continue?
I even can't call this as a work. It's my duty. Even I don't want a mission, because I still have relationship with my husband. Because I loved him, and I think it's just like minimum on what I can do for him to keep his voice alive.
You do see it as your duty to do.
I keep his voice alive, and he asked me for this.
You had to fight so hard for there to even be a public inquiry into the killing of your husband. Do you feel that if leaders had taken you more seriously then, that we wouldn't be where we are now? Because you can trace a line through certain events.
Unfortunately, yes, and everything we now calculated what we didn't do. And now maybe, yes, we regret about it. But now I think it should be more concentrating what we have to do now and not to regret anymore.
No, I suppose it's just, I think some of the things that have happened, and of course with the killing of your husband, the poisoning of your husband, it's important to say what happened there. People almost maybe weren't taking the notice that they could have done. I mean, regular people as well as leaders, that it's an extraordinary thing that happened on UK soil. And there are other examples around the world.
Yes, and even more, I would like to add, this was not, of course, murdering of my husband. It's the worst what I could receive. But this was using radioactive polonium-210. And this might make some people more serious and concerned about this. When it was particularly proved, Russia state used radioactive material in the British soil, and this huge amount, what could kill many people. And we're just lucky. It was not many people died during this attack.
Yeah, it was very lucky.
And of course, since 2006, it should be more serious for what happened. But then, it was not so much support from European community. It was not so much support from America, because it looked like an ordinary case.
And yes, it wasn't.
It wasn't.
How was it to try and fight for him, for justice? You are at the end of all court cases, I believe, now. But what was that process like?
You never know how long it could take. And in this case, you just try to do what you're capable to do. I've never had this practice to be in a British court. And of course, some people say after doing something, if you knew from beginning, you never done it. No, I would do it. I would do it. And you know why? Because I've met so many nice people here in UK. I've been fully supported by journalists, by my legal team who started to work pro bono without even payment.
Did you ever get the compensation? It was reported that you were to get a much smaller amount than when you had gone in for. But did the Russian state ever pay you?
No. I'll tell you some very, if I can call this funny story, because our house was contaminated. And after it was released, polonium, 2010, killed my husband, we should get out from our house in just 30 minutes. And when in 2 months they said all police investigation completed, we can go back to the home, but it's contaminated and need to be cleaned. And price, it was £300,000.
To clean your house?
Yes.
From poison?
From polonium, from radioactivity. Of course, we couldn't pay.
No.
And I remember at that time, again, I mentioned him, Tycoon Boris Berezovsky, who was a direct critic of Vladimir Putin, who was in exile here. He said, it's Putin should come to London and clean this house himself. This was like that. But nobody paid, and we were waiting for 2.5 years until it became clean, completely natural.
So you couldn't live in your home?
No.
And you've still never received any compensation?
This was compensation from British government in basic level, even less if you have some damage in McDonald's.
Right.
but not from Russia.
Just to go back to your house, and I don't think, again, people necessarily think about, they see that image of your husband, which I believe, did you take the photo?
No, I didn't do
You
it
didn't?
myself, but this was offered to take a picture of Sasha. I was disagree because I didn't want people to see him like that, because I didn't think he will die. I wanted to keep his image as normal.
As how he looked, yes. And, but there was and is this image that
Now
people are
it's
very familiar with.
Yes.
And that was important to him, for people to see?
Yes, Sasha, I just realized many things what Sasha tried to do and people could not understand in some moment. They just realized much later.
Yeah. And the reason, going back to that, is people may not have realized that it took several weeks for him to deteriorate and eventually to die, which I'm so sorry about, I must say that. But your house being contaminated like that, I mean, what were those weeks like? What do you remember of them?
What I said, Sasha was poisoned 1st of November, but it was not recognized till he started to show definitely as an illness of chemical or radioactive. But doctors still not able to find a reason why he became so ill. And we all this time we staying in a house because we didn't know this is radioactivity or it might be dangerous to live in a house. And only 23rd of November when Sasha died, and first time I heard about radioactive polonium, been asking to get out from home. But seeing Sasha during these weeks changing so much, it was a torture, not just for me, but I just felt how he felt because he couldn't eat, he couldn't drink immediately since 1st of November. But he was in pain constantly.
Really?
But even if of this, he knew he should give statement to police, he should give his evidences where he went, when and who he met. And he did it for last hours of his life.
I'm sorry to make you think back to that time, but I think it's important for people to hear how it was quite normal and then the symptoms started to show and what actually happened to him and how difficult that was. And you have been, and your son, I presume, were exposed to the potential effects of the radioactivity, is that right?
Yes, we had testing after Sasha died, and thankfully Anatoly, our son, didn't have any polonium in his body. I had slightly higher than it normal, but it was not very bad compared to Sasha, and I was saying, you're not going to die. At least, no, I asked her, good, at least I'm not going dying now. But they said it might affect your life in the future. You might have high risk to develop cancer. It's all what a message I received.
How do you process that you have to live with the threat of potential cancer because your husband was poisoned?
Maybe I'm trying to think less about myself. Because everything what happened then, I was thinking more about our son. Yes. And I just thought, oh my God, it would be so unfair if no parents would be with my son now. Because it was second huge challenge in his life.
How old was your son when it happened?
He was 12.
He was 12.
It's a certain age when everything is difficult. Just 6 years before, he was moved from one country to another one without his asking, because he was just a child, and this was not easiest trip from Russia to nowhere, and finally landed in UK. And when life looked so easy and good, and go to school, and again it's changed so dramatically. Of course, I was very much worried about him, and this helps me to think less about myself.
How is he today? Is he able to live a relatively normal life?
It's so interesting. When we received political asylum here, yes, and we had a protection name, like an English name, and Sasha explained it would be easy to us to travel, not to have a lot of attention. And when Anatoly was 15, and he said, Mommy, could I change my English name to my real name, Anatoly Litvinenko, when I will have my adult passport? I say, yes, of course, you can do it. But something happened and he didn't change. But now he asked me again, I'm definitely going to change
Really?
my passport for my real name, Anatoly Litvinenko.
I can see it's quite emotional talking about that, though,
Yes.
about your identity and your son and how he feels about that.
Yes, but I'm very proud of him because his life wasn't easy. When you are a teenager, you want to live your life, meet friends, but when you see every time picture of your father, of your mother, or himself in the newspaper, it was very difficult, and he avoids this publicity. First time he agreed to talk to media after Malaysian aeroplane was shut down. He was emotional, so breaking. He told me, "Mommy, I don't understand these people because they will not have justice. Russian did it, and they just lost their relatives, but they will not be able to find justice." What was his point?
Do you want to be able to go back to Russia?
I theoretically, yes. But every time when I was thinking I'm ready to go to Russia, something happened. It was like a message, not now. Because a long time I couldn't even think about my travel to Russia after my husband was killed. Then when I was almost ready, we started this whole process about inquest, public inquiry. And I was not stopped, and of course I was not recommended, but I do understand. I could stop in Russia, and not being arrested, nothing, but I would be just stopped and not be able to travel back to UK because I'm still be Russian citizens, and my British citizens doesn't work in Russia.
It's not recognized.
Not recognized. Not recognized. In this case, I knew I need to be there to provide everything what I can do for this, my kind of justice for Sasha. Next, it was poisoning of Skripal, and everything what happened to me, to my husband, Alexander Litvinenko, was again all in publicly talking about. And this was message from Russia. We still have investigate this case too. And they had different opinion, and they saying behind of this crime, this is Berezovsky, MI6, and CIA. This was all strong message to me. If I'm going to Russia, I definitely would be asked to give my statement or to cooperate, or anything would happen.
Do you still have close family there?
I have not my direct, my parents unfortunately died. And you know, and sometimes I think they're just so lucky not to think all of what happened now between Ukraine, between Russia. I still have my cousins, and you know, I'm a little bit worried to talk to them.
Because of safety?
Because of what their opinions.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Even within your own family, there can be that sort of difference?
Even that. And I heard already about how many families or very close friends for many years now stop to be together because of this. And this is another point what I try to raise every time. What Putin did to these people. And they're completely brainwashed. They have no any other opinions. They're afraid to say truth. Not all of them, because we see this all protest in Moscow and St. Petersburg. And of course we need to support these people, because there is hope for new Russia, and they might help to change Russia one day.
Thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us. Until we meet again, take care and goodbye.